So it's been a few weeks since the NFL collusion scandal really hit the news, dropped by Pablo Torre and dropped by Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk. And I'm not going to sit here and explain the thing that this is about. I'm not going to try to explain the story because it's not really my story to explain. If you want to know more about what this situation is, if you don't already, you shouldn't be watching this video. You should be watching any video that Pablo Torre is associated with, whether it's the podcast he did with Chris Long, whether it's his own hour-long video that he made with Mike Florio to kind of kick this thing all off. And what I'm going to kind of do is, I guess I want to douse the flame a little bit and kind of talk about what else this could mean for the NFL, the players, the front office staff members, the off the field members. You know, this thing doesn't just stop with the owners. And I know that this is a collusion scandal revolving around the 32 owners. And in the document that Pablo Torre and Mike Florio evaluate, it namely names 8 owners. Most notably, it's Arthur Blank of the Atlanta Falcons. It's Dean Spanos, or Dino, as some would come to know him, of the Los Angeles Chargers. And it's Michael Bidwell of the Arizona Cardinals. Now, those are the main guys to know, right? But there's a few things that have gone on in the last few seasons, and especially since 2022, where you kind of wonder, like, is this the main, like, we look at the possibility of things like, could referees be assisting the Kansas City Chiefs in 2024 to get them to the Super Bowl? And look, there was a tweet right before the Super Bowl from Peter Schrager where he was quoting Scott Green, the executive director of the NFL Referees Association. And Scott Green says, "It is insulting and preposterous to hear conspiracy theories that 17 officiating crews consisting of 138 officials are colluding to assist one team." Now, now that we've seen that 32 owners are colluding in order to assist themselves. And look, the other part about this, it can't just be 32 owners. De facto, it has to be their GMs. The GMs work directly for the owners. There's probably no trade, except for maybe minor ones. There's probably no signing, except for very minor ones that happen. A, without the owner knowing, and sometimes B, without the owner signing off on it. You know, things just don't happen without communication between those two positions. And so, to me, it's not just 32 owners. It's probably also 32 GMs. It's probably a little bit down the line, 32 assistant GMs. When you consider in 2022, Bill Belichick, who at the time was the GM of the New England Patriots, as well as the coach of the New England Patriots, now you have a coach involved. Now that you have a coach involved, there's a very good chance you have a player involved on the New England Patriots. And we already know from the story that there were 3 players mainly involved between Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, and Russell Wilson. And then throughout the story, once it gets to the end and you involve Dean Spanos of the LA Chargers, it becomes to involve Justin Herbert. Even though none of those 4 quarterbacks knew about the findings of this collusion scandal, they have not been contacted by the NFLPA. And there's 2 guys who really suffered the worst of this. It's Russell Wilson, who, when he didn't get his guaranteed contract with the Denver Broncos, even though in his own words, he felt like he kind of had a promise. And then there's another piece of this where Patton, the owner of the Broncos, the Walmart CEO, was communicating with other owners of the Denver Broncos about this. So now not only do you have the main owner of the Broncos, you have a couple other guys involved in this. And so I get, like, this is just my point to say, when we come back to the referee thing that was in February, I was like, I didn't really care about this statement because, of course, a guy who's the executive director of all of the NFL referees is going to say something like this. But when something like the collusion scandal for the owners comes out, and in my opinion, there's no way to just limit it to the 32 owners, I want to call bullshit on the referees. I want to call bullshit. And we saw a lot of, be honest, if you're a Chiefs fan especially, we saw some bullshit. We've seen some bullshit with the Kansas City Chiefs in late game scenarios. And I'm not talking about the first game of last year where Isaiah Likely landed out of bounds. That was just unlucky for the Ravens. I'm talking about like the game against the Cincinnati Bengals where there was kind of a phantom pass interference thrown when Cincinnati easily should have won that game. I'm talking about just every single moment throughout these last few years with the Kansas City Chiefs where it's like, man, they really just found a way, along with a penalty flag or two, to win this game. And it sucks, man. This thing sucks. Mostly because there hasn't been a lot of coverage on it. And while I do commend guys like Pablo Torre, I have never publicly commended him, but someone like Mike Florio, for taking the time with his law background to kind of explain why this is such a bad deal. But, you know, ESPN, Fox, the bigger actual news corporations like NBC or CNN or Fox News, like, this should be a story. This should not be limited to inner football conversations. This should not be limited to a guy who's not affiliated with an ESPN or a Fox Sports like Pablo Torre isn't. He's a former ESPN employee, and bringing up ESPN, like, they brought Dominique Foxworth on to his show, I think yesterday, to kind of talk about the situation. It's too late. It's far too late. And we know ESPN is in ties with the NFL. We know that the NFL has ties with all these other broadcast companies. And the broadcast companies probably can't say anything about it. Because you know who's probably going to take the worst of this is Roger Goodell. And he should. Because he himself is involved with this. And again, it makes you believe if Roger Goodell is involved with this, with the 32 owners, and there's no way to actually limit that to the 32 owners, how the fuck are we supposed to believe that games haven't been fixed these last few years? Not even just with the Chiefs. I think there's been moments where we could say that games have been rigged for a long time. And if you go back far enough, you'll find actual evidence, not just in the NFL, in MLB, in the NBA, in the NHL, I'm sure. Games have been rigged for a long time. But when you come out and have things like this happen, it just gives you undeniable evidence, and it kind of turns you off from the NFL. I honestly, these last couple of weeks just listening and reading about this situation, it makes me not want to watch. Just to be fully honest. And that's what sucks the most, because it feels like this sport is somewhat being ruined by owners. It definitely feels like it's been ruined by someone like Roger Goodell, who has never had the thought process of helping the players or helping the fans or even helping the teams. I feel like he thought this was helping teams around the NFL by getting in on this scandal and helping them collude to make sure guaranteed contracts didn't become a thing. But to be honest, All this has done is hurting the sport. And this should be the final straw for guys like Roger Goodell. And the guys who were involved in this, J.C. Tretter, Lloyd Howell, honestly, anyone who was in the NFLPA union, a ranking member that knew about this, that helped bury this, that knew of the findings and decided to take the side of J.C. Tretter instead of the rest of the NFLPA, need to go. Plain and simple. And honestly, if they're a current player and they were in this, they just need to leave their post within the union. They need to shut up for a while because they allowed this to happen.